Well, a sad reality in this building is when the majority makes a mistake, instead of learning from it, they often double down. And, last year, Republicans jammed through the capital gains elimination bill. And that was something that Democrats spent a lot of time hollering about in this building, saying, hey, this is going to blow a huge hole in our budget. And guess what? It did, to the tune of $600 million. I think that you'd think that by now that they'd learn that rushing through the legislative process is not how good policy is crafted. But instead of learning from those mistakes, like I said, the floor leader yesterday doubled down again and shut down debate on overhauling local property taxes. Now, we are in a chamber that is currently, pushing an income tax bill that would increase taxes on most of Missourians. But what we're hearing from constituents across the state is they want property tax reform. So here we are discussing property tax reform, and we get barely an hour to debate a bill that is almost 100 pages long with an 87-page amendment that was added on the floor, and the floor leader cut off debate. Democrats are on board with providing Missourians much-needed property relief, but details matter. And we barely scratched the surface of how this bill impacts local governments and their ability to serve residents. And again, this is in the context of trying to pass an income tax bill that is so egregious and so poorly messaged by the majority party that even though it was one of the first bills we heard this year, it has not moved in committee yet. Dying to know why that is. Can't imagine that it's a perfect bill, that they're waiting for the right moment. It's very clear that this bill is deeply flawed, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how the majority party handles it from here on out. A lot of things happened in the room this week. We actually started two-a-day sessions in earnest. It is week 6 of the legislature, so we've been busy. We are happy to take any questions.
So, on the property tax bill, have you identified areas that will increase costs on individual property owners, or is it just a generalized objection to the amount of time spent on the bill?
Representative Steinhoff, would you like, I know that you have some thoughts as the ranking member on the committee that it went through, and I'd love for her to share some of those impacts with you.
And I'm sorry that I missed the beginning, so I'm not sure if you're referring to something that was talked about earlier.
No, just now she was talking about the amount of time spent on the bill on the floor and saying that it was a big, complex bill and too little time was on it. And I'm just wondering if there are details that you all didn't get to bring out that increase costs to individual taxpayers, or if it's just a generalized complaint that too little time was spent on it.
Well, I do think that there should be a level of discourse for everything that we pass through this House. But that bill, I've been tracking some of the different features of property tax that has been discussed around the state. I have a list of 30 things on my list so far that I've seen presented in a bill in-house this year. That particular bill had 17 of the 30 in it. We spent most of our time on the floor talking about an election, an amendment that probably should have gone through the Elections Committee, because the people on our committee have spent a lot of time trying to become experts on property tax. I don't trust that we're experts on elections, and I would have preferred to see that go through the committee. But the bulk of our time on the floor was spent on that. So we didn't get to talk about the fact that that bill would change a market approach, which is widely used and understood by people in our state. That would change it to a replacement cost. And when you do that, that is going to create, in my opinion, chaos when we start to look at our assessed valuations. When you link that to how Hancock does provide stable revenues for our taxing entities, then that just means we're going to see some people's bills go up, some people's bills go down. I predict there's going to be a shift from our wealthier taxpayers. I believe some of their property bills will go down. I think some of our poorer taxpayers' property bills will go up. But I think it's beyond that. And I think the rest of it is very unpredictable, because it's hard to just look at a spreadsheet and see, is somebody's market price, how it compares to the replacement cost. And that's just one of the 17 things that are in there.
So, I mean, in areas where the market is not strong, rural counties with few home sales, areas of urban areas that have, maybe been struck by a tornado, and nobody, and so therefore the neighborhood is less attractive to move into. What are replacement costs versus what you pay for a house in those neighborhoods?
Well, it just depends on the neighborhood, to be honest. I can think of some communities around our state that are in, some impoverished areas, but they're big, grand homes that might have been built a century ago. Imagine how much it would cost to replace that home. And in the condition that I see them in, is that homeowner really going to be able to afford that increase to their taxes? And I know in my own community, you buy a house on one side of town versus a house on another side of town, they can have the exact same floor plan. They can be 3-bedroom, 2-bath, ranch-style home. The land that it's sitting on may fluctuate a little bit with market value, but the price to build that house in my community is probably going to be the same, but those houses might be worth $150,000 difference. And might I add, we didn't get to talk about that on the floor. So when we see over and over again votes coming out of there being very partisan, both sides of the aisle are relying on the experts that were in that room to have that conversation. And our side of the aisle did not get a chance to talk about that conversation. Now you might say that, well, yeah, Democrats got to talk about property taxes. We got to talk about the amendments, which one of the pieces of the 17 that I talked about was talked about on the floor. And when I say how I think that changing to replacement costs is going to create chaos in our communities, it's going to happen in Republican communities and it's going to happen in Democrat communities. So I think that each representative has a right to hear those sides of the argument so they can make an informed vote.
Other question?
Ani, Representative Ani, could you speak on the divorce while pregnant bill, second year that it's gotten unanimous approval from this chamber, but it still needs to make it through the Senate?
Yeah, I am so incredibly proud of the progress that this bill has made since the moment I introduced it, I think 4 years ago. The first year I introduced it, it didn't even get a hearing. The second year it got a hearing, but it didn't get a vote out of committee. The third year, it was carried by a Republican and passed unanimously out of the House. This year, same story. Of course, we know the story in the Senate last year was that a lot died on the other side of the building. And I am so incredibly hopeful that that doesn't happen this year. Women in this state, and frankly men in this state, deserve the opportunity to have their divorce finalized regardless of pregnancy status of one of the members in the couple. This is a common sense, bipartisan piece of legislation, and I am just so excited to see that it's moving quickly this year. And again, I just really hope it gets to the governor's desk.
The most common criticism, if any criticism, that I hear about this bill is just like, why do we need it? Does this really happen all that often? Can you answer that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it happens all the time. In fact, we heard on the floor today or it may have been when it was perfected the other day, but the bill handler, Representative Williams, she spoke about being pregnant and a victim of domestic violence and the challenges she faced when she went to the court to try to get a divorce. The reason I filed the bill in the first place is because I heard about this problem from an organization in Kansas City called Synergy Services. And Synergy works with women and children who are victims of domestic violence. They also have an offenders program where they try to rehabilitate folks who are convicted of domestic violence. And what they've seen over the years is something called reproductive coercion, where a partner will keep their partner pregnant so that they cannot get divorced because courts are turning people away when they come to them. Now, when you look at statute, you won't find anything in there that says that women who are pregnant cannot get divorced in this state. But what we're seeing is because there's a form when you go to apply for a dissolution of marriage, one of the questions is, are you pregnant? And if the answer is yes, they often just send you away. And so, there are two pieces of this legislation. One is putting it in statute and making sure judges understand what they are capable of doing. The other thing is making sure that our courts and the clerks that are working in our courts understand that this is how it should be and this is how pregnant folks should be treated in this process.
On the gender affirming care ban, the speaker changed his vote from a couple of years ago, and he is running against Representative Engel in a Senate seat. I'm sorry she's not here, but how do you think that that vote will play in that Senate district?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that there are a few things to consider. Yes, in the general, Carrie Engel will be the Democratic candidate, but the Speaker has a likely primary to get through, and I think that we should consider that when we consider his votes this session. I can't speak for why he made the decision to change his mind, but I can speak to the fact that Representative Engel has deep experience in the community, has deep experience as a social worker, who has been listening to folks year after year in this building tell us what they need from their legislature. And I think that folks in that district are looking for a leader with consistency.
Good afternoon. In regards to House Bill 1866 with the peace offer as it has been passed, I'm just wondering what you were looking in the future to maybe do or to fight back on this, just to see where your position, where this bill could possibly go.
Yeah, so on perfection, several members of my caucus offered an amendment, and I'd like to let Representative Jobe speak on that a bit. But what I'll say is that, we wanted to make sure that as we're looking at these requirements that we're imposing on folks, that we would be open to folks who have served in our military to be eligible for this. And that was struck down by the majority party. And, that is one area where we wanted to come to the table and have a discussion about how we could improve this policy. And again, I'd love Jobe to speak a little bit about that and why that was important for him.
Sure. Thank you. And my reasoning for that was pretty simple. I think, and we had some discussion about that today, about the oath of citizenship that people raise their right hand to when they become citizens of the United States. Probably all of the members of this body and most of the people that are U.S. citizens have never went through that process. This was an opportunity to take a group of people who have affirmatively raised their right hand and swore to defend our country, our Constitution, and us, and give them an opportunity to serve in the same place as you and I, who are already citizens, if they're on that path to become citizens, that they can continue that service in our communities, just like they did overseas. I thought that was important, and a distinction that should have been pretty easy and bipartisan to get across. It didn't turn out that way. I'm disappointed in that, and we'll certainly be looking at ways to affect that change in the ultimate outcome of that bill, because it's still got to go through the other side of this chamber first. Thank you.
Representative Vogel, I was going to see if you could comment. There were hours and hours of testimony yesterday about proposed budget cuts by the governor for people with disabilities and the in-home care that they get, and also the day have stuff. Do you feel a sense either way of if these cuts are going to be restored?
Yeah, so what the governor's recommendations for the Department of Mental Health included were two significant cuts to self-directed services, a program that allows individuals with developmental disabilities to be cared for in their home, and day rehabilitation centers, which is a program that allows individuals with developmental disabilities to participate in community and get outside of the home. Both of those recommendations currently have only been recommended by the governor. The budget, of course, is working its way through the process. We heard, to your point, hours of testimony yesterday from families from all corners of the state about how these budget cuts would impact their lives, the lives of their loved ones. I think what you heard and saw yesterday was a true bipartisan effort to restore these funds. I know Subcommittee Chairman Representative Chappell has gone on record multiple times in support of restoring the cuts that the governor recommended. There is a $6.2 million reduction in self-directed services and a just over $20 million reduction in day habilitation rates. It would be the intent of this caucus and the intent, it sounds like, from the majority of the individuals in the Budget Committee to restore those funds. I know I can't speak for the majority party, but I can tell you that is one of the top considerations for House Democrats, is making sure we're not leaving individuals who rely on state government the most out in the cold. I understand we have to make budget cuts, but I'm uncomfortable making them there.
Can you talk about some of the reasonings behind some of the testimonial, what they said, how it would impact them if these cuts were to actually happen?
The governor's recommendations include about a $7 an hour pay cut reduction for self-directed services. The testimony that we heard yesterday included families and caregivers talking about how if these funds were reduced, if this pay was cut to the extent of $7 an hour, a lot of those staff would no longer be able to continue to provide that care. The individuals that operate under the self-directed services model aren't entitled to benefits, paid time off, retirement, any benefits that we would see in other state government. So I think the pay becomes really important. The wages become really important. We heard heartbreaking testimony from families and from caregivers talking about that parents would have to make a decision on which parent was going to work outside of the home. We had families that shared testimony with us that if these funds were reduced, there's a high likelihood that their loved one would end up on a waiting list for a facility. I think those things are abhorrent, and quite frankly, I think members on both sides of the aisle feel that in the House. And I really do think that there's going to be a sincere effort to restore those funds as the budget makes its way through the process. And I'm very thankful to all the families who traveled to the Capitol yesterday to have their voices heard.
Thank you.
The Budget Committee has been taking testimony as it finishes work in each department's budget this year, as opposed to last year when it was, public hearing was one morning and nobody showed up. Has this helped the budget process? Have there been, is it changing people's minds about some of the actions maybe the governor took?
I think yesterday we saw truly a grassroots effort from Missourians from all corners of the state to restore funds to a program that's very important to so many. I think, to my knowledge, there's no lobbyist that's employed to advocate for self-directed services. It was truly a grassroots effort, and I think the public testimony that the Budget Committee heard yesterday really did change hearts and minds. I think all of us on the Budget Committee understand that we're in a different financial position than we've been in years past. I also think everyone walked out of the budget room yesterday in agreement that this is not the place we want to do it. And so I think we haven't seen a lot of public testimony on other budget bills, but yesterday was a wonderful example about how if you're a Missourian and you're getting impacted by the choices being made by your governor or the choices being made by the people in this building, your voice really does matter. And I know our caucus is very proud to play a small role in that.
Anything else? All right, y'all have a great weekend. Thanks so much.